Socialism and communism. Communism, I repeat, was and is a militant version of what we call socialism. The message of socialism was that people of different nationalities didn't have any borders. Okay. Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels finished their Communist Manifesto. If you read it, remember the catechism of the Socialist Creed, called the Communist Manifesto, written in 1848. It had the few last paragraphs that said, I don't remember exact quotation, but you will look it up. And it says that workers...
right here?
Yeah, you can find it, you can read it.
Like the very end of the book?
Very end
Okay.
of this book, yeah. At the very end of this brochure, better to say, it says that workers of different countries do not have fatherland and motherland. Okay. And they have nothing to lose except the chains. Workers of all countries unite. That's the last phrase in the Communist Manifesto. Okay. So the mess. Huh?
And it became the motto of a lot of.
Exactly. It's a meme, like we say today. It's a meme of socialism. Because traditional socialism, I repeat, socialism, what it means. It's internationalism. It's like preaching the brotherhood of all nations. Okay. Brotherhood of all nations. But later, I want to jump ahead a bit here. In the 20th century, when this creed was fulfilled, when people made attempts to assimilate this creed, adjust it to local soils, it always ended up in kind of local versions of National Socialism. I'm sorry to say.
Found it.
You found it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you want to read it?
Yeah, go ahead, read it.
Okay, so it says, the communists turned their attention chiefly to Germany because that country is on the eve of the bourgeoisie revolution that is bound to be carried out under more advanced conditions of European civilization, and with much more developed proletariat than that of England in the 17th and of France in the 18th century, and because the bourgeoisie revolution in Germany will be but the prelude to an immediately following proletarian revolution.
That's the part I would like you to make a note. Okay, go ahead.
In short, communists everywhere support every revolutionary movement against the existing social and political order of things. In all these movements, they bring to the front as the leading question each a property question, no matter what its degree of development at the time. Finally, they labor everywhere for the union and agreement of the democratic parties of all countries. The communists disdain to conceal their views and aims. They openly declare that their ends can be attained only by the forcible overthrow of all existing...
That's another part I would like you to pay attention. So the slogan of the revolution, right? A violent revolution. Okay.
Existing social conditions let the ruling classes tremble at the communistic revolution. The proletarians have nothing to lose but their chains.
Okay.
They have the will to win, working men of all
Good.
occupations.
All right. Will to win. Okay, great.
Now, is this what inspired the socialist revolutions of 1848? Were they Marxist?
No.
No.
Okay. The founders, Marx and Engels, did hope it would develop into the communist revolution, socialist communist revolution. At that time, socialism and communism, by the way, they were used as synonyms. Okay. Only later, as I said, we kind of introduced a different usage. Socialism, communism, a militant version of socialism. But it didn't happen. And that's what upset them. And each time when the economic crisis happened, they said, hey, that's the crisis, let's read the signs of time, so let's be ready. It didn't happen. Then another crisis. In the 1870s, crisis happened, the world economic crisis. Here you go, another crisis. So it's a time. So let's read the signs of time. It's a fundamentally theological prophecy. It didn't happen again. So let's go back to Russia. Okay. So we did this detour last time. We learned about Marxism to kind of enlighten us about what kind of doctrine Russian Bolsheviks or Russian Marxists observed, because in Russia this doctrine became very popular among revolutionaries who originally had preached a different message, right? The original message had been that the peasants were the salt of the earth. They were the great new hope. And since peasants did not fulfill their role of the redeemers as the chosen people, so they found the new doctrine, the new creed that kind of explained to them everything, because it did look logical and convincing, especially at the time of Industrial Revolution, the time of when science was becoming popular, religion was going down at that time. To be an educated person, you had to believe in science at that time, to show off that you hate kind of religion, church. You know, that was a kind of cool countercultural. Because if you read the books by Russian writers, like one of them, Ivan Turgenev, who numerous translations exist of, even collected works of Turgenev exist in English. Okay, he is famous for writing a book called Fathers and Sons. Okay, so where he basically describes these limousine left people who hated the aristocratic fathers, mothers, and who in a countercultural way decided to rebel, negate their values, and they felt compassion for the people, which is understandable. So basically, he doesn't say they were populists, but people who sympathize with populists. And basically, the major character of the novel is a man named Bazarov. Again, we don't need to remember the name, but what is notable here is that this guy, a student, of course, a university student, he kind of boasts around that I don't give a damn about this God and everything. So he challenges this, and he says, I have no faith, I don't believe in anything. And as I told you once, I want to repeat it again. So he was confronted by another person, an older guy, and they involved into this debate, and the student says, everything should be explained by science. Science is going to become the religion of the future. That's our creed. And I'm proud that I don't believe in anything. And he says this, the older guy, his famous phrase, which I repeat, quoted to you. He asked him a question, do you believe in this? He said, yes, I'm convinced, I believe in this, in science. How can you say that you don't believe in anything? So the science does become like the new science worship. Sometimes we use this expression, scientism, okay, or pop science. You heard this expression, pop science. When people with well-read people, they pick up something from other branches of science, and they say, hey, that's how it should be. You know, that science says us that the world will be gone like in 12 years. You know, you have to stick to this. Or again, I don't want to offend anybody, so please forgive me. I simply couldn't resist. Or something like the evolution. So it could be a different thing, you know. Sometimes it is backed up by facts, sometimes it's not. So we have to see, science is always limited, and that's what people don't want to understand. Okay, they think that science can open them the gates to the future, and that's how people viewed Marxism. Many people came to view Marxism as the science, the ultimate science that could explain us the future, because it has laws of nature, and laws of nature say to us that humankind goes through the stages of evolution, from primitive communism through slavery, through feudalism, through capitalism to the end of history, communism. Okay, everything is logical, convincing, and since Charles Darwin had told us that natural world developed approximately in the same way, from lower stages to higher stages. Hey, here we go. We have this similar concept of societal development, which resembles the evolution of nature. So we have the evolution of humankind. So you have to believe in evolution. Okay, so the people subscribed to this at that time. So now we are more skeptical. We call ourselves even postmodern people. When we don't trust anything, we don't believe in anything. Well, it's a natural skepticism. Okay, but at that time they didn't have the skepticism. They did to be an educated person meant to believe in science. Okay. Anyway, going back to Russia. So Russian revolutionary movement was switching the gears. Not everybody. We still have a strong populist trend. Later, in 1900, this populist trend organized itself, and they created a political party called SRs. I think I told it, which means socialist revolutionaries, who still preached that peasants were the great new hope. Okay, but at the same time, many populists switched the gears, and they joined Marxism. They said, no, the new great hope is the working class, and that's the working class. Why? Because the history laws say us. And look, read Das Kapital by Karl Marx, where he, unlike the Communist Manifesto, Das Kapital is a huge book. It's an unreadable book, which explains the details how these...
Saying it's unreadable.
unreadable.
So huge.
Huge. It's like 600 or 700 pages. It's only first volume, Das Kapital. He planned to write 3 volumes. And Marxist, socialist and communist admit that rarely anybody read this book, but everybody kept it on his or her shelf because it was like the Bible, you know, to have this kind of volume of Das Kapital meant you belong to this kind of movement. Okay, it's a symbol, like Bible says. I have a Bible. I have the Bible. I have different Bibles, but I never read any copies to the end, you know, only parts of them, I have to admit, although my field is history of religions. Yeah, that's why I didn't have time for this, which is shame, eh? I'm sure, who read the Bible from cover to cover? Eh? You did, yeah? Okay. We have 2 persons, see, unfortunately, only 2 persons. And I specialize. I have 2 degrees, PhD degrees. One of them in the history of religion. Tells a lot, yeah, about it. Anyway, Das Kapital. Das Kapital, it's... what is the year when it was published?
1860 something?
Yeah.
Let's go Google.
All right, while you're Googling, I'm telling you that the first in the whole world translation of Karl Marx into foreign language was made in Russia. 1871, okay? And it was the first Marxist book published in Russia. And you may ask me, how come? Because in Russia there was a heavy censorship at that time. But the problem was that when the censor read this book, he said the book was so unreadable it would be safe to publish. So it's no big deal. So the book was published. But again, I repeat, the meaning of this book was not to be read. What was read was the Communist Manifesto. The meaning of the book was to be kept on the shelf, to be carried around like a token symbol of new religion, religion of Marxism. Okay? And a lot of students, intellectuals, people with some kind of elementary knowledge, or maybe well-read people, they accepted this, and a lot of populists agreed with this. I gave you the names of this girl who was one of the leader of the populists, Zasulich, Russian-Polish girl, Russian aristocrat, George Plekhanov, who originally was a populist. He actually founded the first Marxist group in Russia. Okay. We also mentioned that Russia entered the stage of capitalism. So investments were coming, industry was coming to Russia. Okay? And indeed, Russia had the industrial working class already. It was not totally a peasant country. Of course, it was still predominantly a peasant country. But still, Russia had about 2 million workers in big cities, Warsaw, Moscow, St. Petersburg. Okay, that's the fact. We also talked about the first Russian Revolution. Did we talk about the first Russian Revolution? We did, right? Oh, we didn't. We did? We didn't. So Russia, when Russia entered the first, her industrial revolution, why do I think we did?
I think
You said something.
we explained the term Duma, but I don't think we discussed exactly how it was done.
You talked about the Witte system, but not
With the system.
the 1905 revolution.
I remember we're talking about nationalism, rising nationalism in Russia. Okay, in Industrial Revolution provokes in underdeveloped countries this outburst of nationalism because people begin to mingle, compete for jobs, businesses compete with each other. Before it was a feudal empire where everybody knew his or her place, estates, no mobility. But now there was a lot of mobility. Some peasants moved to Siberia, Central Asia, take over lands from indigenous people, from Siberians. Okay. Some Russian, Ukrainian peasants moved to cities, begin to compete with Jews, Greeks, Armenians, mostly with Jews. Pogroms, remember we talked about anti-Semitism, 2 million Jews moving to the United States between 1880s and 1920s. And eventually discontent emerged. Okay. The Industrial Revolution, a positive experience, produced this unfortunate effect. Okay. When society goes through transformation, especially the minds of these peasants who moved to cities to become new workers were not adjusted to city life. Okay. A lot of challenges. People, countryside folks were not adjusted to city life, so they didn't get used to these schedules. Some of them were, they wanted to get these salaries. They made more money than they had made in the countryside. But at the same time, comparing their lifestyles with the middle class lifestyles, it didn't look attractive. They wanted more, of course. It's a natural human nature. Plus, they were exploited. 12-hour working day, let's admit this. Okay, and they had no rights to create unions. There were no political parties. And especially this boiling point was moving further and exploded into 1905 revolution. The first revolution in Russia. There were 3 revolutions. I did write it down, remember?
Yes, that we did have.
Yeah, the 3 revolutions. First, 1905, second, February 1917, and the third communist revolution, which built up this communist regime, was October 1917. Pardon?
When was the second revolution?
February 1917. Or March, according to a new calendar. All right? So 1905 revolution was sparked by the defeat of Russia during the Russo-Japanese War. Okay? Did you hear about this war? Okay. I'm not going to dwell on this, just for information that Russia, which was slowly industrializing herself compared to Japan, was defeated by Japan. I did mention this last time. I did mention it. Okay? So I'm repeating myself. Why did you tell me that I didn't? So now it comes back. See, I'm eating my time, which I wanted to invest into discussing this 1970. But anyway, a lot of people in borderlands believed that the power of the Russian Tsar was gone, especially in these indigenous areas, newly incorporated in the Russian Empire. Okay? And the Russian Tsar had to make concessions, so he created this Duma, which you mentioned. This Duma is the first parliament in Russia. Duma. Again, superficial system of checks and balances where the Tsar was the executive power, parliament was Duma, and there were courts created that had been created by Alexander II. Remember the courts, trials by jury. Although, I repeat, the final say belonged to the Tsar, and when the revolution subsided, the Tsar, Nicholas II, his government court, tried to roll back this revolution. So, nationalities which wanted freedom, self-government, didn't get it. Okay, workers didn't get what they wanted, 8-hour working day or 10-hour working day. Okay, even this was not accomplished. Okay, the second major blow at the regime was the World War I. So that's where I want to find my narrative after such long introduction. Okay, long introduction. Okay. World War I. Without, many historians right now have a consensus opinion that without World War I, probably there would be no the communist revolution in Russia. Okay. World War I literally plunged the country into the state of chaos and disarray, but nobody predicted it could happen. Okay. Everybody knows how World War I started. Like it's a chain of unfortunate events, a snowball effect. Nobody could predict. This, okay. It started in Sarajevo when Serbian terrorists from a terrorist organization named the Black Hand shot and killed Archduke Franz Ferdinand. Okay. Austria wanted to apprehend these criminals. Serbia said no. Okay. Austrian troops invaded Serbia. Russia backed up Serbia. Austria-Hungary was afraid of these combined forces and appealed to Germany, her bigger sister, to help them. Germany entered in the war against Russia. Russia now was feared of the alliance of these two countries. They asked for the French to step in. Okay. Now Germany, Austria-Hungary were afraid of these combined powers. They asked Ottoman Empire to step in. That's how Ottoman Empire stepped in. Now France, Russia, and Serbia were afraid of these combined forces. They asked England to step in, and that's how we have these two alliances fighting each other. Okay, I'm just a big galloping through these events. Okay, just reminding to you. Everybody expected it would be a short war, 2-3 weeks minimum. Everything would be over, and each side believed it would be a winner. Okay, that was the expectation. But the war dragged on and on because, to the surprise of many, World War I differed from previous wars, which were old-style wars, when people were marching, the music was playing, the drumming was done. Okay, it was done in an appropriate way. Now everything was smashed. All concept of war was smashed by the technology. It became a technological war where technology was tried, used on a grand scale. Plus, it was a total war. Everybody was involved. Civilians, military people, men, women, everybody was involved. Men were recruited to fight. Women were drafted to do what? To do factory labor, to drive trucks, to work as male men became male women. Okay. In Russia, 15 million peasants were mobilized for this war. Russia was still a backward country. Okay. I always tell my students when I discuss World War I as applied to Russia, the horrible conditions of these peasant soldiers who were not equipped well. Okay. There were not enough rifles for them, and when some peasant recruits asked their officers when we were going to get guns, they were normally said, "Wait for your comrade to be killed, that's how you will get your guns." So, yes. It's a story repeated by everywhere. You go on the History Channel. Okay. But the most important for us is that mobilization of these people disrupted economic life, because Russian agriculture was a subsistence agriculture. Okay. 15 million families essentially ended up losing, at least temporarily. Not all of them were killed, although the number of Russians killed during this war was much higher compared to Western armies. Okay. What happened? Soon, by 1917, the country noticed that how hard it was without these males to perform their subsistence labor. Let me mute this. Okay. At first it was not so noticeable, but by 1917 the big Russian cities started to experience problems with what? Food shipments. Not enough food shipments. A lot of supplies were diverted to feed the army, so not enough to feed the civilian people. But the Russian industry was not even able to provide ammunition to the army, like cartridges, cannons, guns, everything. So Russians had to go to England, had to go to France to ask for this. And England and France did send these supplies. Okay, supplies. And eventually that's what provoked the whole crisis. The crisis in Russia started in February, or according to new calendar, March 1917, on March the 8th. What is this day, March the 8th? Does anybody remember? Huh?
Is it the Ides of March?
I'm sorry?
The Ides of March, or no?
No, no. In Europe, everybody knows this day. But in the United States, it's not celebrated. It's not. Nobody pays attention to
It's
it.
a flag, I forget what it's called.
Mm-mm.
No, that's not.
Here's a trivia for history trivia. So, any other?
South,
Huh? No.
What was the International Women's Day?
Exactly right. It's an International Women's Day. In Russia, in Germany, in Spain, in England, it is celebrated. Okay. And by the way, this tradition goes back to socialists, because socialists were so powerful in terms of, they became embedded in European politics. So, and of course, people made the mainstream, cultural mainstream, assimilated a bunch of traditions from socialism. One of these traditions, which still they do to the present day, International Women's Day, March the 8th. So, the Second International, created by Engels after Marx died. Remember, the first international had to be shut down because this crazy Michael, socialist, or anarchist, Michael Bakunin, anarchist, threatened to take over International Working's Men Association. So Marx and Engels had to shut down, and later they created the Second International. This Second International introduced this tradition, March the 8th, International Women's Day, and now it's celebrated in Europe to the present day. Okay. So on this day, women of St. Petersburg went to march against what? Against lack of bread and flour in stores, okay? Because the shipments were disrupted, everything for the army. Huge crowd, about 200,000 people, and the police was ordered to disperse the crowd. Police refused. Then troops were asked to help, and the troops refused. That was the end, the beginning of the end, okay? The Tsar was absent from St. Petersburg. He went to the front line in Poland, where Russians and Germans were fighting each other. He tried to boost the morale of the troops by his personal presence. Okay, so in his absence, these things happened, and the governor of St. Petersburg lost the power, and the power was taken over by a group of people who started to call themselves provisional government. Okay. And the Russian Tsar was forced to sign his abdication. He had no choice. Plus, he was a weak Tsar. Remember, he was a weak Tsar. He didn't resist. So everything kind of, all the pieces of puzzle were put together, and they guaranteed the originally smooth transition of power. There was no blood spilled. Okay, originally, I repeat. Of course, later ended in a big bloodbath. But at this point, there was no blood. So the Tsar signed his abdication, and power was seized by so-called provisional government. Who were these people? Middle-class professionals, bourgeoisie, some socialists, some SRs, okay. Some constitutional Democrats, nicknamed cadets. That's an abbreviation. Okay. But at the same time, parallel to this, militant socialists created a second central power, a mob that called itself a Soviet, a council. Soviet of workers and soldiers deputies. So there were some soldiers who deserted from the army, and workers who associated themselves with so-called social democrats. So they declared themselves the second central power, which wanted to check on provisional government. Okay. In this Soviet of workers and soldiers deputies, I repeat, radical socialists who later became known as communists, they were popular. In this group of people, moderate socialists plus some bourgeoisie, okay, middle class. In this Soviet of workers and soldiers deputies, the biggest role belonged to so-called Bolsheviks. Okay. Now I have to introduce Russian Marxist Party, Social Democrats, Social Democrats. So Russian Social Democrats. That's how socialists were called in the 19th century, or in the beginning of the 20th century. Social Democrats. Okay. The party was created in 1903. Okay. And it immediately split in two parts. I repeat, it's very important what I'm saying right now. So-called Bolsheviks and Mensheviks. Bolsheviks means people of majority. Mensheviks, people of minority. During the founding of this socialist party, there was a debate which goes back to the time when Marx died and Engels took over. Do we need to necessarily take over power by violence? By doing violence, dictatorship? Because Marx, remember, Marx said the dictatorship of the proletariat. So working class people, redeemers, they should take over, subdue resistance of property classes and navigate the others to the radiant future. Okay? Or we need to do everything peacefully by waiting when each country would become ripe for the communist revolution. What does it mean to be ripe? It means each country should have the majority of population composed of the working class people. Okay. So there was a debate. Bolsheviks said, no, not necessarily you have to wait. As long as you have a nice, vital, and aggressive minority of workers, industrial workers, they can be like leaders, okay, because they're the hope of the future. Plus, in US, in England, in France, in Germany, you already have majority of industrial workers. They are a majority of the population. So globally, we have capitalism winning, so the society globally is ripe for the communism. Yes, in third world peripheral areas like Russia, we still have majority of peasants, but it doesn't mean because the revolution would win simultaneously in all countries together. Because workers of the West would join us if we stop. Okay. So Bolsheviks were more militant. I would say that they were picking up something from populist tradition because it was so popular. Okay. So we need to do a violent revolution. We need to use this minority of workers who would lead the peasants and other discontent people, and they would make the socialist revolution and phase out the people of property. Mensheviks said, no, we have to wait. We have to wait because Russia is not ripe yet, it's not industrialized yet, so we never know when the time would come. You don't read the signs of time correctly. Again, it's a very theological approach. So Bolsheviks said, no, we know the signs of time. And the Mensheviks said, no, you cannot read them correctly, you have to wait. Okay? So that was the debate. Plus, Bolsheviks said, Socialist Party should be like a militant order where people should be disciplined. They should have an iron wheel and they should observe the commands of the leader chosen by the rank and file members. Mensheviks said, no, the Socialist Party should be open to all kinds of people who want to accept socialism. So Bolsheviks were more like they defended the idea of so-called the vanguard party. Mensheviks said, no, we need a loose organization where everybody who loves socialism can join. Okay? So that's the difference. And later, I repeat, later, in 1919, the entire socialist movement became split in two big factions. Okay? The communism and social democracy. So socialism had this great schism, I call it great schism. 1919, when Bolsheviks, Russian communists, came to power. Okay. Mensheviks lost, and many Western socialists started to accept this position that we can do things by ballot, by voting booth. You don't necessarily need a violent revolution. And communists disagreed with this. They said, no, we need to have a violent revolution because people of property would never give up their property. Okay. So that was the debate. So in this council, Soviet or workers and soldiers, deputies, this first group, Bolsheviks, they called the shots. They called the shots. Mensheviks were also there, and there was also a small group of people who called themselves left SRs. SRs was a big party, populist, but there was a small group called left SRs who agreed with Bolsheviks because they loved their calls for immediate revolution, because it resonated with old populist ideas. Okay. What we have in 1917 in Russia is called a dual power. Provisional government was losing a popular support. Why? They hardly noticed this. For two reasons. Provisional government said, we are provisional government, we need to prepare Russia for general elections. We need to elect a constitutional assembly. So they used the language of the French Revolution. Remember, on the French Revolution, they had national assembly. A provisional government said, Russian population did not have any experience in electing people. So we need to work to conduct elections in the so-called constitutional assembly. Peasants said, we need land right now. The peasants wanted to seize all lands of landlords, all. And plus lands that belonged to monasteries. Another reason why Russian peasants eventually became frustrated about Russian Orthodox Church, because Orthodox Church didn't want to give up these lands. So peasants wanted to use the occasion to seize these lands. And they started illegally to seize those lands because the country was slowly, because of this dual power, was slowly entered the stage of chaos and anarchy. The local police forces disintegrated, local administrations disintegrated, and essentially people didn't know what to do. Okay, all local power was gone. So that's the first reason. Peasants wanted land, and provisional government said, wait, we need to wait when the Constitutional Assembly would be elected. Then the second thing, Russian peasants hated the war. They didn't understand what was this fight all about. They couldn't understand. And indeed, it was very unpopular war, not only in Russia, but in many other countries. Okay? And Lenin, I think, was correct to some extent when he called this war an imperialist war. Okay? An imperialist war. Because for the interests of these elites. But Lenin, the chief of Bolsheviks, I repeat, the chief of Bolsheviks was Lenin. I will bring up, I will tell more about him. Okay. He said that he was not a pacifist. He said, we do not need to be pacifists. We need to use this war. It's a good thing. He said, war is a good thing because it speeds up everything. It speeds up our entrance to the radiant future, communism, because it creates this antagonistic relationships among different classes. It creates this state of chaos, and we're going to exploit this chaos. Don't allow a good crisis to pass. I forgot who said this. There's a catchy expression. Don't let a good crisis to pass. So take advantage of this. That was his position. So that's a revolutionary situation. We need to exploit this because Russian Empire was in this state of chaos, anarchy, and provisional government, I repeat, was losing support because of these two things. They pledged to continue the war, which was unpopular among the peasants. And the second thing, they refused to immediately grant land to the Russian peasants. Okay. See, Napoleon never made this mistake. When the French peasants had seized the lands of landlords during the French Revolution, so he immediately issued them the certificates of ownership. That is why he was backed up immediately by the entire nation. Okay. But here, provisional government made this mistake. But Bolsheviks did not make this mistake. They said land. They came up with a simple slogan: a land to the people, factories to workers, and something else. You will see. Okay. I always forget this. Three things in this. So provisional government. Although provisional government declared these formal freedoms, they didn't exercise the support. The Soviet from down below challenged the power of the provisional government. Plus, provisional government had these intellectuals some of middle-class intellectuals, and that's the reason why they were unpopular, who wanted to introduce the Western-style constitutional government, which sounded Greek to the majority of people because they couldn't understand this talk about human rights, a constitution. Even the idea of elections was alien. It's like George Bush going to Iraq and said, hey, you need republic, democracy, you need elections, something like this. Okay, let's move on. This guy was put in charge of provisional government, a socialist, SR. He was a member of this SR, Socialist Revolutionary, eloquent speaker. At first was very popular, so he was this compromise figure that all people who were against the Tsarist regime accepted him. But then, because of these two things which I mentioned, he was losing his popular support and could not consolidate the country. He appointed commissars, provisional government commissars in local areas, and nobody wanted to listen to them, okay? Because these commissars didn't give land to the peasants and didn't want to stop the war. Although the provisional government pledged to continue the war, people started to vote by their feet. Soldiers left trenches. In many areas, Russian soldiers were hugging German soldiers. So the campaigns of brotherhood. And the Bolsheviks encouraged this. So that is why how Bolsheviks gained the popularity. Because in a short period of time, they did what they offered, did resonate with a lot of people. Okay? It's another question how they were going to use their popularity. Okay, they had their own agenda. But the point is that they were winning, at least, not everybody, but at least a significant part of people accepted them. Okay? Especially soldiers and workers. Okay, if you might not need to write anything except this, what I forgot. Remember I said, Bolsheviks came up with the slogan, land, bread, and peace. Land to the people, bread, land, bread, and peace. And all power to the Soviets. So land to the peasants, bread, okay, peace, stop the war. Wonderful. In fact, Bolsheviks were the only political party that unequivocally advocated against the war. SRs were split. Left SRs were ambivalent about support or not to support. Right SRs supported the war. See, it's very inconsistent. So Bolsheviks were winning masses. Bolsheviks had 7,000 people, the number, before 1917. After the revolution, first revolution, March 1917, their number skyrocketed up to 240,000. See, a lot of soldiers and workers joined them. Now I said I want to bring to your attention this figure of Vladimir Lenin, the chief of Bolsheviks. Okay, jumping ahead, when they came to power, Bolsheviks, they renamed themselves in the Communist Party to make a point that we are the communists, we are not social democrats, we are not simply socialists, we are communists, we are more radical socialists. And our goal is communism by the violent revolution. Okay. I purposely picked up this image because that's how Lenin was depicted after 1917, in the kind of shape of this prophet who pointed to the radiant future. At first, masses, follow me in the communist revolution, and after revolution won, follow me toward the radiant future. So that was a prophetic figure, charismatic person who lived on the eve of the February/March Revolution. He lived in Switzerland more than 10 years, in Zurich, in Switzerland, and as an emigre. Okay. But when the revolution happened, he immediately felt that was the time. That was his moment to use this crisis, especially when provisional government made such fatal mistakes, not giving land to the people and not stopping the war. I have to be there. Okay. But he had a problem how to get to Russia, okay, because Russia was in a state of war. And that's when this legend emerged about Lenin being a German spy. If you go to YouTube, you click Lenin, Zurich, Lenin's train, so you will see Lenin in German, you will see a bunch of clips about Lenin being a German spy. But there is a story behind this. A German military staff decided to use Bolsheviks against Russia because German military wanted to drive Russia completely out of the war and to shift all the troops to the west. And the Bolsheviks, who had their own agenda, they said, hey, it's good. So if they offer us money and transportation, so let's use this and we are going to follow our own agenda. So at this point, kind of the two forces, German military and the Bolsheviks, they had this common interest because Bolsheviks needed somehow to get to Russia. And German military allowed the military train to be mobilized, so-called SEAL train, where about 200 Bolsheviks were put, and they were allowed, money was given to them, and they were allowed to go through Germany into Russia. Okay, so-called SEAL train. Why SEAL train? Because the Bolsheviks were not allowed in German cities to step on German soil because they were afraid that they might propagate socialist ideas and destroy the morale of the German soldiers. Okay, so by using this SEAL train, so we're going to ship this kind of Trojan horse. That's how the Bolsheviks were treated by the German military, and they did become the Trojan horse because their slogan was "Stop the war," okay, which was unpopular in Russia. The goal of Lenin and Bolsheviks was to turn the war, what he called an imperialist war, to turn this war into a civil war of the poor against the rich. Poor against the rich. So he comes to St. Petersburg or Petrograd. St. Petersburg was renamed during the war because Russians were advised to hate all things German. Okay, so that is why St. Petersburg was renamed in the Russian sound in Petrograd. Okay, so he comes to Petrograd, to the Finland station. It's a major railroad station that connected Russia to Europe. And the mob of excited people put him on an armored car, and where he delivered the speech from the top of this armored car. He delivered a speech in which he said that workers should revolt immediately against provisional government, stop the war, okay, land to the people, all power to the Soviets, okay, and we don't need to wait, just we need to do a revolution right now. There's a great book by an American, he is one of so-called New York intellectuals. He's an American writer, classical American literature, called Edmund Wilson. You heard of this name? Edmund Wilson. If you want, at least for me, I'm a foreigner, so I like to kind of pick up the history books or just documentary books written by good stylists. That's how I learned a good style. Okay. As far as the history writing, I read Stephen Ambers, who might be not a good historian, but his style is good. Okay. So Edmund Wilson, I would say Stephen Ambers of intellectual history. Okay. If you want more nuanced, more kind of grounded in intellectual history, Edmund Wilson. When I compare Stephen Ambers and Wilson, it's just a matter of style. Okay, they're totally different people. Okay, Edmund Wilson, in fact, was a socialist sympathizer, but it shows that how a powerful kind of well-rounded person who has a critical mind. He can look at his own side with a critical mind. Okay, that's why I appreciate him. Edmund Wilson, a classical American literature, wrote a book called To the Finland Station. To the Finland Station. It's a classic. I recommend it. It's a history of socialism, a brief history of socialism written in a very popular way. Okay, it's an interesting portraits of major from Robert Owen and Karl Marx, Saint-Simon, Lenin, Trotsky, all these portraits of major socialists. Okay, to the Finland Station, and at the center of this narrative, Vladimir Lenin. So it ends. The book ends with the Lenin arriving to the Finland Station, delivering this message. Again, it's a very accessible book that gives you, if you have time. Published in 1940, but a lot of times reprinted, and recently, in 2016, was a new edition published. Okay, I find it very useful, both from a literary viewpoint and history viewpoint. So, arrival of Lenin to the Finland Station after 1917 was immortalized in a lot of paintings. There's a bunch of paintings which depict Lenin as the prophet of communism, arriving and delivering, getting off the train and delivering the speech with his pointing to the future. And this mob of excited people welcoming him. And that's how the triumphal march of Bolsheviks started. The second in command was Leon Trotsky, famous Leon Trotsky, who in fact was the person in charge of Petrograd Soviet, this Soviet of workers and soldiers' deputies. Before Lenin came, Trotsky was there already. Trotsky came from the United States before. He was also an immigrant, lived abroad. But Trotsky was already in charge. He was a good speaker. And they kind of created this union, like Marx and Engels had this friendship. Here we also have this revolutionary friendship, Lenin and Trotsky, because Trotsky also had this theory that coincided with what Lenin said, the permanent revolution. So you need the development of society is so fast, you don't need to wait for a time period between capitalism winning and then waiting for like 100 or 200 years for a communist revolution. Because in modern times the development is so fast, you can immediately jump from capitalist bourgeois revolution into the next stage, communist revolution. And that's what we have here. We just had the bourgeois revolution when capitalists took over, March 1917. Now we have to roll on and make a communist revolution. Because globally capitalism won. Russia is a peripheral country. So globally capitalism won. It's ripe right now. So let's just move on. Permanent railroad to the communist revolution. There was a Russian imperial officer called, named Lavr Kornilov, who was upset about this whole, the country was going to hell, he felt bad. And he mobilized the Cossacks and loyal officers and decided to stage a coup d'etat, a takeover, a right wing takeover, officers take over. Kerensky, who was a socialist, was petrified. And nobody wanted to support him because provisional government by the end of summer 1917 lost all power. So he asked Bolsheviks, come and help me. Because Bolsheviks exercised this influence over the mobs, city mobs. And Bolsheviks said, yes, of course. So give us arms. And he opened the armed storages to Bolsheviks. And Bolsheviks created so-called Red Guards, workers who were armed. And that was his biggest mistake of Kerensky. So he armed the Bolsheviks. Bolsheviks did put down the right-wing coup. They sent the Red Guards who stopped Kornilov, disarmed his soldiers, arrested him, arrested the officers. But at the same time, it was the end of Kerensky government. In the fall, October or November, according to our new calendar, October 25th or November the 7th, 1917, Bolsheviks simply decided to take over banks, all major railroad stations, governmental buildings, and that was the end of the provisional government. The only place which was controlled by provisional government, it took only 6 hours to subdue the resistance of like a meager force that defended this place. It was called Winter Palace in downtown of St. Petersburg, where provisional government was sitting. There's ministers of education, ministers of transportation, this group of like 13 or 14 people. Okay. Nobody wanted to defend them except the battalion of death, the female battalion of death, some middle-class girls, like 200 of them. It's an interesting movie. If you go to YouTube, there is a movie called Battalion of Death, I think that's the name. It should be an English version too. Just interesting movie, historically, it really has a lot of true things. So it's not simply a fake movie, like based on real facts. So only 200 people agreed to defend provisional government, and this mob of people that supported Bolsheviks and many soldiers disarmed this battalion and arrested the provisional government, and that was it. Kerensky was so surprised, he didn't know what to do. At the last moment, he was able to put nurse outfit on him and escape through the back door. And he was friends with an American ambassador who put him in the car and kind of smuggled him to Finland and later to the United States. And he eventually Kerensky settled in Michigan and died in, I think, in 1975 in Michigan, Ann Arbor. Okay. So that was the end of provisional government. Bolsheviks took over again. No violence. Nobody died. So nobody was harmed. Okay. Because I repeat, this female battalion was surrounded by thousands of people. They simply had to give up their guns, and they were just kicked out from the place and left. Okay.
Didn't the people with money leave?
Huh?
Didn't the people that had money leave? The rich people, the bankers?
Yeah, that's where the story starts. Okay. At first, nobody paid attention. Nobody took it seriously. They thought it was just a joke. But Bolsheviks meant business. They did declare the dictatorship of proletariat. They made all political parties illegal. And they said land to the people. That's why peasants at this point supported them. Workers should take control of the factories. Wonderful. So at first workers supported them too. So everything worked well originally. That's what people thought at that time. Okay. I want to repeat again. There was no violence at this point. Lenin said, we didn't need to take over power. We picked up the power. And indeed, that's how it happened. We picked up the power. Originally, everything only happened in St. Petersburg. But since Russia was so centralized, autocracy, since Bolsheviks so popular, in other cities, people started to imitate this. There were local councils of workers and soldiers, deputies, who followed this Bolshevik coup in Moscow. In other local areas, Bolsheviks take over power, allied with left SRs. And eventually it spread all over the former Russian Empire. Of course, in national areas, the story was different. Baltic countries, Poland, Central Asian countries in Ukraine, they declared independence. They tried to take advantage of this and declared independence. Bolsheviks viewed this event, what happened in St. Petersburg, as the spark that would ignite the worldwide Holocaust. Soon, workers in Germany, in England, in Sweden, and the United States would join us, and socialist revolution would win, and eventually would be communist. The whole globe would be communist. That was the expectation. This kind of profoundly, if we were to use the bookish language, profound eschatological view, you know, prophetic view. So there is I wanted to briefly to bring to your attention, there is a debate among historians to the present day. Some historians, I would say more conservative, on conservative side, they believed that Bolshevism was imposed on Russia. It was like an alien force. And it goes back to what Alexander Solzhenitsyn, the famous Russian writer, said. Alexander Solzhenitsyn. It's hard to spell this thing. It's a Russian writer of whom we are going to talk more. Okay. Just at this point, like popular Russian classical current Russian literature. So he said that was an alien force imposed on Russia. Solzhenitsyn expresses more this like Slavophile views. Remember that appreciation of Russian Orthodox Church, Russian traditionalism. It's an alien force. And some American, this guy later immigrated to the United States in 1978. So he became one of the icons of U.S. conservative movement. Okay, you have to know if you don't know about it. So that is why some historians of a conservative bent, they agree with him. And one of the major representatives of this, these ideas, Richard Pipes, who wrote a very powerful book called Communist Revolution. There's a short version of this book, like 100 pages if you're interested. Richard Pipes, who essentially said it's an alien force, it had no roots. Bolsheviks had no roots. Which is not exactly true, because there were roots, okay? It's no idea can win popular support without having some kind of support. Remember the saying, when students are ready, a teacher comes, right? That's what happened in Russia, okay? The human material or situation allowed this to happen. There's another school of thought, I would say, people more on the left, revisionists, who emerged in the 1970s, some new left historian who said, oh, Bolsheviks were wonderful, they expressed the interest of common people, they're good. And only later, Stalin, like evil genius, he kind of made this detour from a correct path. Lenin was great, wonderful. But Stalin spoiled the ball, destroyed this wonderful image. Again, another distortion in my viewpoint. Okay? Because Stalin was a child of Lenin. He was produced by Lenin, of course. But what revisionists do have a point, we have to admit. What? Bolsheviks did have support. Communist revolution did have support. I wouldn't say all peasants supported, but many peasants, even peasants supported them, because they said, lend to the people. As far as urban workers, they did support Bolsheviks a lot. Because Bolsheviks declared the slogan, factories to workers. Okay. But Bolsheviks meant business. They decided to fulfill this prophecy of Karl Marx. Prophecy. So in order to railroad society to communism, you need to do what? According to Karl Marx, the dictatorship of proletariat. If we are going to have the dictatorship of proletariat, it means we need to subdue the resistance of classes, alien classes. The evil people. Bolsheviks call them the former people. Former people. They even introduced this expression, the former people. Former people, who were these people? The middle class people, merchants, clergy, aristocrats, bourgeoisie, bankers. They were also allies. Allies were peasants. So, good but not completely good. Because each peasant wants to work on his or her land strip, so they cannot be trusted. But the workers were the kind of, on this food chain, I would say, of communism. Were on the top of the pyramid because they were salt of the earth. They were the hope of the future, and they were redeemers of society from evil capitalism. Okay? So in order to subdue the resistance of those who resist against this communist revolution, we need to create secret police, and it was created, so-called Cheka. Cheka, it's an abbreviation, which is translated as follows. The Commission to Combat Sabotage and Counter-Revolution. The Commission to combat sabotage and counter-revolution. So abbreviation would be Cheka. Because don't forget that terror against classes of property, people of property, was not the only task. Russia was in a state of chaos, so Bolsheviks decided to show that they were the statists. They knew how to exercise the state power. So they started to tame the kind of mobs of sailors, soldiers, workers who looted bread stores, wine stores. Okay, they did try to crack down on this. And simultaneously arresting rich people and locking them.
Did people know about the Cheka?
About what? Yes, they did, of course.
Then how is it the secret police? It's no secret.
A secret police is that, why secret people, of course, Bolsheviks didn't use this expression, secret police. It was used by other people who didn't like it. Why secret? Because you were arrested secretly, there were no accusations against you, you were locked up. So that is why secret. It was done during the night, that's the nickname, secret police, okay? And under the cover of the night, normally it was done. Plus, all political parties were abolished. Why? Because now Bolsheviks said, we are the ones who express the interests of the people, because the workers knew the way to the future, and we Bolsheviks, the vanguard, the working class people, so we are these enlightened engineers who would railroad society to the radiant future. Okay? They immediately declared so-called Red Terror. It's a terror against former people. In 1917, in St. Petersburg, 800 people were arrested. The prominent bankers, politicians, aristocrats, all just common people, intellectuals who disagreed with them. Okay? And later, many of them were executed. Okay? Without any accusations, just because they belonged to alien classes. In fact, Cheka issued a decree to all local branches, and local cities were created branches of Cheka, and local branches received an order from the chief of the secret police, who was a Pole named Felix Dzerzhinsky. It's hard to spell, because I don't know how to spell, that is why I gave you this name here. Okay, I don't want to spell it on the board. Felix Dzerzhinsky, a Polish aristocrat who originally was planning to become a Catholic priest. But at some point, his sister died. He had this kind of crisis, psychological crisis. He discovered for himself a new faith, a faith of socialist faith. So he became a fanatic believer in socialism. So he spent time in prisons, had tuberculosis, decided to sacrifice his life to liberate the humankind. So he was put in charge of Cheka. Okay? His nickname was Iron Felix, because he decided to introduce this iron justice in Russia. Anyway, an order was issued by him to local branches of Cheka, and that's where we will end the story for today. The order is very simple. Don't look at what people committed or did. Look at what class did these people belong, and that's how you're going to judge them. So this kind of group, social justice, or group justice. So not individual justice, but the group justice. It's an interesting message. Okay? Bolsheviks were masters of this.